Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Deborah Uber, the Education Coordinator for the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center. This morning, we are so happy to bring you the webinar entitled Questions Without Answers, Considering Anonymous Donations. Now, before we get started today, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation, please contact WebEx Technical Support at 866-229-3239. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation using the questions you submit through the Q&A feature. You are welcome to submit your questions at any time during the session, and we will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, simply type your question into the dialog box in the Q&A panel on the lower right-hand portion of the screen. Then press send. Very simple. So when you submit your question, it will be visible to all of the panelists, but not visible to other attendees. If you happen to be in the full screen view, you can click on the question mark icon on the toolbar in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This will open the Q&A panel on your screen only, not the other attendees, and we expect the presentation to last approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes for Q&A. We will be distributing a copy of today's presentation and a comprehensive list of answers to any questions submitted today during the webinar. Just as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. Now to get started on the introductions, our lovely presenter this morning is Ms. Kris Probasco. Ms. Kris Probasco has over 40 years of experience of infertility counseling and adoption experience. She is the founder and CEO of Clinical Counseling Associates, and she established adoption and fertility resources in 1993. Kris also established the first regional adoption agency and fertility clinic partnership in the U.S. in 2006. She operates locally in the Kansas City area, and we are always so happy to have her with us. So, Kris, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. You can go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you very much, Deborah, and it's really a pleasure to be with all of you today, and a very mindful topic that we're going to be discussing. So our first slide, I'm sure many have been in this situation as infertility patients and getting information and diagnosis. Most folks that go to infertility are trying to have their genetic child, like all of us. And this is what everyone that wants to have a child wants to be able to have a part of the man and the part of the woman with the child. But as treatment goes on and there's more and more difficulties discovered, the option of egg donation or sperm donation may be presented by the physician. So, of course, what's next? This is definitely a crossroads. Most folks say, I never thought I'd be here, but here I am, and what in the world do we do next? Next slide, please. It's really a good time to take a break at this time, to really grieve the loss of a genetic child. This was the child of meaning. This was a dream child. This is a child that you talked about as you were becoming a couple, and you're wanting to have his eyes and her smile or whatever you were dreaming about for your child. So it's definitely a grief process that is natural after this diagnosis, as well as a recommendation. And you go through all the feeling out of control, why me? You know, if it's one partner that has the fertility difficulties, am I really stopping my partner from having a genetic child? And it can be really hard on people individually and emotionally. So as families receive this diagnosis, they may think of an egg donation or a sperm donation as being very uneven. So they would unevenly be connected to the child. One would be genetically connected and the other would not. And for a lot of families, this is an uncomfortable situation, and they look then to adoption. And many of the people that I work with, when I describe embryo adoption to them, they talk about this being the best of both worlds. So we have a child that is equally not genetically connected, but we get to give birth to our adopted child. Next slide, please. With more success in the grief and more recognition of the grief, research can begin, and families can switch from focusing on their desires to become pregnant with their own genetic child to their desires to become parents. So I may not be able to be a full genetic child to my child, but I certainly can be a parent to the child. And they look forward to the needs of the future child. With embryo, next slide, please. And you will find, I guess I didn't add on from the last slide, but you will, as they do research, they will find that today 95% of all domestic adoptions are open adoptions. So the domestic adoption field has gone through all of its processes in recognizing the helpfulness in having people remain connected through their love for their child that is placed and the love for the child that is parented. So with embryo adoptions, and when you adopt through an adoption agency, you're able to have many options. You're able to have answers to questions, and you also have the advantage of having professional staff that can work with you in making your decisions as well as working with the genetic family. At this stage of consideration, you can think about the type of communication you would like with the genetic family, and then also make the good decisions for moving forward with a decision. Next slide, please. So even with the decisions that are made, there's also a reality that starts to be discovered. And one of those realities is that a large number, and probably 50% if not more, of the embryos that were created for the genetic family, the placing family, used anonymous egg or sperm. So regardless of the level of communication with the placing family, you will also have embryos that are connected to another genetic family in that decision. And boy, does that kind of hit hard, because you've already decided I didn't want to have an anonymous egg or sperm with our own conception. So now I'm faced with decisions of trying to choose embryo adoption and also choose, be available for embryos that were created with egg or sperm donation. Next slide, please. So I think this slide represents a little bit of what I talked about before, and you know, I think when folks think about embryo adoption, when they first start researching, they do think that the genetics will come from the couple that is placing. And the shock, it's another shock of so many embryos that are available are connected with egg or sperm donation. And how do we get beyond thinking that this could be a possibility for us and all the reality of what's available? Next slide, please. So families can say no to being matched with embryos used by anonymous donors. However, it does limit the possibilities of matches, and it could take a considerable amount of time to be connected to embryos that are genetically connected to both of the placing families. So that is a humbling information that's received of, so what do we need? What do we want? Our desires is to have a child. Our desires is to have a child as soon as possible. But is it okay for us to move ahead with this decision of anonymous donors, when in the past we decided we didn't want to have that. So a lot of emotions get stirred in trying to make a good decision. Next slide, please. So again, the surprise. And you're not alone. As we know, 1/6 of the married population has fertility difficulties. 40% is male factor, 40% is female factor, and the 20% is a combination of both or unexplained. So there's lots of folks that are looking to options to create their family with children. Is speed really necessary for you, or do you need to widen your viewpoint of what type of embryos would fit with your expectations and your desires? Next slide, please. So, of course, there's lots of emotions that are part of what is available, and it's, you know, not only an individual crisis, but it's also a couple crisis, especially, I think, for the folks that have one partner has available genetics and the other partner does. So we need to be very careful that we manage our emotions as best as possible and take time to get through this shock. And what really, next slide, please. And what really starts coming up is denial and detachment. And that may have been a phase of grief that you thought was settled as you move forward with adoption decisions or third-party decisions. But it comes back up again. And you have to really pay attention that you're going forward in a way that you would be proud of the outcome. And that takes time, and it takes time to break that denial again because this is really something that is serious, and you want to make the best decision possible and not be all emotionally tied up to the pressure that you may feel about wanting a decision made quickly. So, yes, it's complicated, and yes, it's not fair, and all of those things are really being recognized and paid attention to so the grief can continue to be successful. Next slide, please. So, you know, we want an opportunity for success, and sometimes that can place a lot of, again, emotions that is hard to develop past to feeling free to make a good decision. This is such a great slide, and a lot of the families that I work with that are choosing embryo adoption already has a child that they were successful with through infertility, or they were successful with through their own process, and really making the decision for an embryo adoption includes that our child will have more of a normal experience with their mom and dad being pregnant and expecting a sibling, and they will eventually be told of their what brought this child to the family, but they get to be part of the prenatal care and all the experiences of pregnancy. Next slide, please. So let's talk a bit about what denial really looks like. When I see families coming in that say, you know, I don't really want to know anything about the donating family. Certainly if they have a donor connected to it, I don't want to know anything about that. I really want to pretend as if this is my own child, genetic child that's being transferred. It won't be obvious to people in my circle of friends and family. They'll see a pregnancy and they'll think right away that that was a creation through our own efforts. But what we see when people go forward with decisions during denial, they seem to get stuck there. And they end up being really parents that have lots of fears and concerns. So we don't want to build a parent-child relationship that's based on fear or denial of their importance. We want to be able to have parents that are ready to tell the child their adoption story. Next slide, please. So what we've seen over the years, and I guess by doing this for the last 40 years, I've had practice in seeing this, is that when parents move forward with a decision and aren't successful in resolution of their grief, that they become overprotected parents. They're very fearful of rejection from the child. They may be unable to tell the story and afraid of the story, place a genetic parents as superior to themselves. They also may be in a position of poor discipline where they want the child to be their friend, and it's hard to be authentic and real when you're trying to connect to your child through a lot of concern and fear and uncertainty. They may also have, when they come to adoption, they may have also spent tons and tons of dollars in trying to get a genetic child, and now they're looking at a bank account that isn't quite as significant to help with the adoption expenses. So there's lots of stuff that goes into the denial that we hope eventually will be resolved and they can freely move on to a good choice. The next slide, please. So what does acceptance look? You know, we talk a lot about getting through the grief and getting to acceptance. So acceptance means that your self-esteem is no longer connected to your ability to reproduce or achieve a pregnancy with your own genetic child. Once that acceptance has been obtained, then the parents are very clear about being an advocate for this child and to do everything they can for this child to succeed, no matter what the facts of their beginnings are and the facts of their genetic connections. So it's really a sense of openness, a sense of being relaxed, a sense of non-judgmental decisions, and we will be parents by an embryo adoption, and we are so happy that we have chose this way to bring a child into our family. Next slide, please. So accepting embryos with anonymous sperm or egg donor is really another genetic component to your child's story. So it's important to, when you're thinking about this, it's important to know that there will most likely be siblings of the genetic family that has the same kind of genetic connections. There also will be more available information, hopefully, in accepting the sperm and egg donor, and I think that gives some relief to families so that they can become an advocate and really understand what decisions, the decisions they make will affect this child's life and their life forever. So the next slide, the pros and cons of egg and sperm donation. I think these are an example of a few of them, but I'm sure each individual and family and couple can come up with some more. But usually when you're looking at egg or sperm, there's probably more egg donors with the embryos than there are sperm donors. So with egg donors, the fertility practices prefer that their egg donors are 26 years of age or younger. So this is definitely having younger eggs means more success in implantation and also with being able to carry a pregnancy. There's also been a lot of health screening for the egg donor and the sperm donor, and each facility that works with these donors goes through what is recommended by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine and also the American Tissue Bank and the FDA. So there's lots of requirements that are needed in order for a man or a woman to become an egg or sperm donor. The clinic that you work with will have some information regarding the donor that would also be helpful in the telling of the story. The cons is that the possibility of having siblings, and I think that's the hugest one to be, again, humbled by, that there may be, or there will be, more children from the egg donor if they've been successful for other families, for the sperm donor in being successful for many families. So we need to get our mind wrapped around that, this will be an issue for our family and that we will be as helpful as we can for the child in understanding. You may not be able to have an open relationship with the sperm or egg donor as you will with the genetic family, so that also may be not as satisfying to you. And the one thing that I stress is the medical history is frozen in time. Even though you may have lots of information for some of the egg donors, I see as much as 18 pages of information and family history and such, but that is frozen in time. And so it's good that you have that background, but then you may not be able to have ongoing information. The next slide. So will the child be asking questions? Oh, tons and tons. And we're hoping that you would be able to tell the story as often as possible so that some of their questions can be thought through and be, as sufficient for the child as they start to ask. The askings usually start at age 7 to 8, and of course gets more sophisticated over time. It's very interesting in the sperm donor business. We've been doing sperm donations since 1884, so lots and lots of children have been born by this way. But it wasn't until the mid-'80s that the sperm banks became the primary way that donors donated their sperm. So the Sperm Bank of California was the very first bank to have what we call open identified donors. So they started this in the mid-'80s, and at age 18, the donor-conceived child is able to come back to the bank or call the bank and say, I want to have information about my donation. And what they've seen is that they really have particular questions that they're asking and particular information. So I think it's very, very helpful to pay attention to the children that have lived this and what they recommend. I always, my teachers for my 40 years has been adopted parents of the past, adoptees, adopted persons, donor-conceived folks, and donor parents, and all of those that can tell me what difficulties they had in the lifespan of their family. The next slide. So a majority of the donor offsprings asked for current medical information. So there's that frozen in time medical information, and they want to have anything current that could have happened in the donor's lifetime in the last 18-plus years. So, of course, there's going to be quite a bit of that. They want a picture of the donor. Donor offsprings go through an identity crisis or identity formation, just like all of us do in our adolescence and early 20s. And to have a picture of the donor so they can see how they're similar to the donor is so helpful for their identity and almost a must. They want to know what kind of hobbies they had, what their personality was like, their interest, really making the donor a human being that's part of a family, and that human has these things, and they want to see if some of their likes and dislikes or hobbies or interests are similar to the donor. They also want to know how many siblings they have. Now that's the wild question, and I don't know if the Sperm Bank of California kept track of all that, but I think they also refer them to the Donor Sibling Registry, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So what they found when they first were contacted is that about a third of the children, pending adults, wanted to locate the donor and wanted to have direct contact. About a third of them wanted to have the clinic contact the donor and find out the particular questions they had, and then they would consider if they wished to meet with the donor at a later time. And about a third of them was just really checking in to see what additional information they could have and making decisions later if they want the clinic to contact the donor or if they want to find the donor on their own. Okay, so what does this tell us? This tells us that the adults coming from a donor conception want information, and probably more than what's provided. And that needs to be next slide, please. So what does this tell us is the slide that I need. So this is where it's immensely helpful to get as much information as possible. So when you're choosing your donor and being really a very vicious advocate, asking questions, why can't I have this information, or why can't I have a picture, or why can't I know their first names, and, really getting the revolution going in terms of being active parents, that will definitely continue to change the attitudes of the donor facilities that we're really working in creating a pregnancy. However, we're creating a child that has lifelong needs. And if there's things that we can do now in giving the particular information to their parents, then that's going to be helpful for the child lifelong also. The next slide. So once you've given birth to a child that's connected to a donor, a sperm or egg, you will be able to contact the Donor Sibling Registry. This is a national registry, the only registry we have in the United States. There are registries in 9 different countries with families and donors having a national registry. The Donor Sibling Registry is private. It is not federally run. And I often say in my lifetime, before it's time for me to retire, I don't know when that will ever be, but that the United States will have a national registry that's federally funded and mandated for all families coming together by donor. So they are able to research. They've done quite a lot of research with the Donor Sibling Registry to give current information, and they're able to give lots of details. And another slide will have that. One thing I want to have is just maybe as FYI is that the family that you've received the embryos from may not have contacted the donor sibling registry to register their family. They may not have had that interest, but that doesn't mean that you can't proceed with the embryos that you receive and give birth to. So what is the donor sibling registry? Talked a little bit about it, about connecting families and donors. They do have some donors sign up. They have looking for half siblings. There's over 50,000 matches at this time, registries, 50,000 families are registered, and matches are happening all the time. When you first sign up, next slide, please. So when you first sign up, what you're going to be needing is the clinic or the donor bank that the egg or sperm was received from, and the donor number. The contact information that will not go out of date, so perhaps your email account or your cell phone, whatever you think is best to provide. And then basic information about the donor conceived information. And then when you sign on, you're given a password that is your way to get into the donor registry, and your password will be activated if the donor registry is able to have a match from another family that received their child through the same donor. One story I have that I often tell is that I had a family that gave birth to a child having a seizure, and scary, scary, scary. And the doctor said, well, I'm going to have to do exploratory surgery when the baby's 12 pounds or 6 months old. And, of course, as any parent, you are very, very concerned. And so they signed themselves up for the donor sibling registry. They found 7 matches in terms of 7 families that had a child from the same sperm donor. And 5 of those families had children with the same difficulty. So they were able to tell the physicians at Children's Mercy Hospital here in Kansas City what had occurred with the other siblings, and so their child didn't have to go through all the testing and surgery to try to discover. They knew what medication was effective and how this seizure problem was being dealt with by other physicians. So helpful, so helpful. We're not parenting in the dark. We're parenting with connections, and I think that is very, very meaningful. So some families also, next slide, please. So some families also consider doing DNA testing, especially with older adolescents or young adults. And there has been hundreds of matches through DNA, both in the adoption world as well in the donor world. I just got an email from a woman that I know that had an unknown birth father. It was her mother met him at Fertility, and she was conceived, and the mother didn't even knew his first name but didn't know much else about him. And she signed on for, I think, these two, Ancestry.com and 23andMe, and connected to a half-sibling. And then from there, she was able to locate her father, and they've had a reunion, and they're working on a relationship. I also, Bill Corderay, a donor offspring that's spoken very loud in the last 10, 15 years, was able to locate 34 half-siblings by being on the DNA testing sites. He found a cousin in Australia that led him to his donor and then also to his siblings. It is very important for some, not all, but I think, the more that genetics and DNA is definitely has always been part of who we are, but the more knowledge that people have regarding that, the more desires that all people have to know their ancestors, and especially for those that are adopted or donor conceived, to fill in the blanks for all of those unknowns. Okay, so the next slide will talk to us about putting the child's story together. I know a lot of families, when they come in and say, how in the world are we going to tell this story? And I really feel like hugging them, because at least they're thinking we got to tell that story, rather than parents of yesteryears where they were told never to tell the story. So we got a great bunch of folks coming into this process that want to be, once they've finished their grief, want to be very concerned about the child and telling the story to the child. So the best way that I know is to create a beginnings book, a life book, the story about their beginnings and their coming to your family. There's also storybooks. If you go online and put storybooks for donor insemination or donor egg and embryo adoption, there's lots of different storybooks that are available, which is also very helpful to read and to have the child get some knowledge. So we need to first acknowledge that the child will be receiving knowledge in their early years, but then they will have an understanding as they're older, and that knowledge will become beneficial in their understanding. So putting the life book together at the very beginning is so helpful. So these will be pictures of yourselves and the wedding day, or the days that you decided that you were going to pursue embryo adoption. You would have why you chose this process, and then perhaps why the placing family chose you, pictures of the placing family, pictures of the siblings, documenting the day that you were transferred, and if you're able to get pictures of the embryos, that's even better. But if you're not able to get pictures of the exact embryos that were transferred, other embryos can do. But everybody starts the same. We all start from our little beginnings, and embryo adoption is the same thing. Of course, during the pregnancy, having pictures as the baby grows, the date of birth and the celebration around them, pictures at the hospital, going home pictures where there'll probably be a sign and balloons and flowers and all the celebrations. So the family celebrates so much when children are born into a family, and are very, very grateful and heartful that they were able to have this experience. So documenting those times for the child is going to be very helpful in the beginning of telling the story. Next slide, please. So the goal is for your 18 to 20-year-old, and yeah, I know that's a lot of years away, but we're setting the stage, is for them to say, I don't really remember being told about how I came to the family. I just always knew it. So it's not a sit down at the kitchen table and a one-time conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, and starting early will help the child have that kind of sense. I just recently worked with a 20-year-old that came to me. She was an adopted person, and I listened to what she knew about her adoption. Was that she was adopted at 1. That's all she knew about. And I said, well, where were you the first year of your life? She had no idea. So we brought the parents in, and they also gave us the information they had that she had never seen. And so she discovered that she was placed in foster care for a month, and then she was transferred to her parents. And her official adoption happened when she was 1 year old, not that she was placed when she was 1 year old. So that really enlightened her and really helped her have a good, with the knowledge, she then had a good understanding of all the different aspects of who she was. So again, keeping the documentation, getting as much information as possible will be very helpful as your child grows. So it is the parent's job to build the child's foundation of how they came to them. And you want to be able to have them say, and this is a statement that I came up with, that when they come to terms with all the pieces of who they are, they can confidently say that the parents of my genetic siblings needed a helper to make us all. Her name is Sarah, and she gave us all of her eggs. So this statement, and I've heard statements like this, means that the child understands that there's a genetic family that started them and that they have full genetic siblings that live in that family, and that's their parents. And their parents was able to receive some of those embryos to be, for them to be grown and to give birth in their family. So they understand the genetic connection, and they really have a real good thought about this all. So this is success, to be able to group it together in terms of we had helpers and to get us here, and have a lot of love that was given in order for us to be in our family. The next slide. So this is really very helpful in looking at what the donor profile can look like. Some of the profiles have essays that are written. They have the hobbies and the interest. They even have some of their likes and dislikes. The profiles can be more detailed or less detailed. So again, it's your job to get those profiles and hopefully get a picture of the donor, so you'll be able to, again, explain that story in a very, very, very helpful way. Eventually, your child will see all of this, but as you're telling and talking, as you're talking and telling, there will be bits and pieces that you will get from these forms to be helpful. So you're going to be able to answer what their hobbies were, what their family background was, you know, their dreams and their reasons why they decided to donate. You will be able to give that to the child and be in a very, very helpful way in providing that. So again, this is being your advocate of getting as much info as you can to proceed. And I'm over talking, so let me go to the 5 tips in terms of talking to kids. And we do have a webinar on, I know, on file with the Embryo Awareness Center that has a couple webinars on talking to the child, so you may want to listen to this also. Start early. Start as soon as they're here. Start talking to them when you're pregnant. Of that, we had so much help in order to get you here. We had lots of helpers that loved you, and we just look forward for you to understand your story, and we're here to help you. So the main thing, the most concrete thing for the child to know in early years is that they are significantly connected to another family, is the basis for their understanding, and what that family looks like, and pictures and information about that family, and then also about the additional helper. So with a combo of all that, having the life books, reading the stories, you're going to have a really good start. So if the child hasn't been told yet and they're older, start telling now. You can backtrack and creating that book again, and you can put all their pieces together up to date so that they'll can start from where you're starting, and then also explain to them that, you know, we just didn't know what to do in terms of telling you your story, and we got some professional help, or we listened to some webinars, or our agency was helpful. So I think that's, you know, our next tip. Don't be shy to talk about it often and provide opportunities for the child to understand their story. When you drive by the hospital they were born, you can say that's where you were born. When you drive by the fertility clinic, that's the office that Mommy and Daddy got help to bring you home. So, you know, as concrete as you can be with your using your environment is also helpful. So get creative with the young children. You want your message to come from your heart and not necessarily the science about it. That there's a poem about you, for an adopted child, you grew in my heart, not in my tummy. For this one, you grew in my tummy and my heart, and we are so thankful that we were able to have all the helpers that brought you into your life. And the next one is make sure the child understands that they can ask any question needed, that it won't hurt your feelings, that you resolved all of that. You resolved that that you weren't able to genetically give to them. You resolved all of that. And this is all about the child and their knowledge and their understanding. There's nothing to be ashamed about. Lots of people were involved in getting you here, and we're thankful for them allowing us to be your parents. So I think I'm going to end now because we have some questions maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kris. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions to come in. I know we have quite a few attendees, and so if you have any questions that you didn't feel got addressed during the webinar, please feel free to submit them now. You have instructions right there. And then while you are submitting any questions that you might have, I'm going to introduce a couple upcoming webinars. So a little bit later this month, on Thursday, October 20th, we have another webinar about talking to children about where they came from, their story, but this one's really focused on the teen years. And so we had a great opportunity within the Snowflakes program to start talking to those original Snowflakes kids that are now teenagers, talking to their families, and really getting some great tips for how do you navigate the teen years, the identity building years, to be able to help them really get a better understanding of their story. You know, when you tell them, when we're talking about talking to them when they're very young, but as they get older, of course, they're going to have more questions, get a better in-depth kind of understanding about this story. And so it's going to be a really wonderful webinar. I really highly recommend that you attend it. And then on Wednesday, November 2nd, we'll be having Kris join us again for a webinar, Getting Through the Holidays with Infertility. So, of course, families that are looking into embryo adoption for building their family, a lot of them are going through infertility, and that's just an emotional, difficult time. It's rarely easy to be around so many family members, all of that holiday time, and without kind of thinking back to, oh, I want that child, I want to be able to have that kind of family time as well for ourselves. And so Kris is going to be helping us again with this wonderful webinar, and I would really recommend that you join that as well. Let me see. I'm not seeing any questions come in. I think you really did quite cover everything that they might have had questions about. Okay. But I do want to give some opportunity just in case if they have any questions. Yes, but yes, I am looking forward to that upcoming webinar in November.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I did see a question come in. Let me read it real quick. We did a closed embryo adoption, and our son is currently 7 months old and couldn't be happier. What is hard for us is navigating comments from others about how he doesn't look like his older brother.
Okay, so we've had so if the family plans on being open with others about their embryo adoption, I think you can safely say that our son had a different beginning than our first child, and we received our son through an embryo adoption, an embryo placement, and we're so excited to watch him become his own person, and we really are looking forward to all the happenings in our family. So that would be to people that you know or feel comfortable with. And for folks on the street, I think you can safely say that, you know, all kids look different. You know, we don't all look alike, and then he looks like our family. He looks like his family. Could be an answer that's truthful, but not giving the information about his adoption.
Yep. Okay. Might give them just a little bit more time just in case there's any other questions submitted. But yes, that's very good. And we also have had some other speakers talk about just, they can say, oh, well, that's from somewhere down the genetic line. Just those vague answers are very helpful, right, especially if it is that person on the street where you just don't want to have to give your whole life story to.
Exactly, yeah. They look like their family.
Hmm? They
look like their family. And then,
right.
Yeah, and that's a general statement too, and it's the truth, but it's not giving details. And I don't think everybody deserves details that ask the question.
Exactly. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. Oh, there it is. Always right before I close down.
Okay.
All right, our first son by embryo adoption was through an agency in a semi-closed arrangement with the donors. Our second son by embryo adoption was through a doctor's office, and while we have a medical history, it's completely anonymous. What are our challenges to look forward, or to look towards the future towards?
Well, you know, this has been in adoption too, where when you adopt twice and you may have different birth family situations. So the best is to continue to recognize how they came into the family and to document as much as you can. Perhaps go back to the doctor's office saying, is there anything else that you can provide for us? We need to be effective parents for the child and really want that availability of information. And then sign on for the donor sibling registry. You could be surprised. There may be other, perhaps the doctor split the embryos, or that happens often if there was many embryos connected to a family and that family donated to the clinic. You could have, there could be several families connected to those embryos, especially if you only received two. Then I think you could probably guess that other embryos went to other families, and they could sign up for the donor sibling registry. Or if there was a donor used in the conception, then, and you know that information, you could hook up with the donor sibling registry. It's just an effort for your children to know that you care about their history and you care about their genetic connection, and you're going to do what you physically can to try and get connections. You may do the DNA swaps to see if there's genetic family out there that are connected to the donor or the embryo placement family. I think this is one of the liabilities in receiving embryos from a clinic, is that they're not a social work, social service organization. They see this as a medical process, and we see this as a lifelong growing process for the family and for the child. So thank you for signing up to hear about this. I'm sure there may have been some uncomfortable moments in listening, but appreciate your attention, and hopefully you can continue to make connections.
Okay, perfect. I don't see any other questions coming in, and we're really quite close to being at the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and close it down. Thank you so much, everybody, who attended and for being willing to kind of walk through these steps and really consider next steps for your family. And thank you again, Kris, so much for joining us. We always love having you with us today, so thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. All right. Have a great day.